So I'm here with Toby Morris from Windrush Business Services, and we're about to sit down and watch the first Labour budget for 14 years, the first ever from a female Chancellor of the Exchequer, to see what's in store for us and what's in store for the country economically. So watch this space and we'll bring you the outcome and our thoughts on this as soon as we've seen what she's got to say.
Fourth, the country...
And we're off. I know she's not got an alcoholic drink. She's not allowed one, aren't you, in the budget?
It was the Labour Party
Is it
that
Norton
rebuilt
that
our country
everything had a pint
from the rubble of the Second World War. In
Yes.
1964,
There we
it
go.
was the Labour Party that... It is the first budget in our country's history to be delivered by a woman. And their mini-budget left families paying the price with higher mortgages.
That would have been a good job, not working.
The British people by £40 billion. Today we are setting a 2% productivity, efficiency and savings target for all departments to meet next year, to increase the national living wage by 6.7% to £12.21 an hour, worth up to £1,400 a year for a full-time worker.
6.7%
And for the first time,
we
will move towards a single adult rate phased in
We'll be driving
over time.
inflation costs for businesses.
I want to set out my approach to fuel duty.
There we go.
Increasing fuel duty next year would be the wrong choice for working people. It would mean fuel duty rising by 7p per litre. So I have decided today to freeze fuel duty next year, and I will maintain the existing 5p cut for another year too.
Another year, so it'll come next year, but I thought that was going to change this year.
So I say to working people, I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax. So in today's budget, I am announcing an increase in employers' national insurance contributions. We will increase the rate of employers' national insurance by 1.2 percentage points to 15% from April 2025. And we will reduce the secondary threshold, the level at which employers start paying national insurance on each employee's salary, from £9,100 a year to £5,000. As I make this choice, I know it is particularly important to protect our smallest companies. I am today increasing the employment allowance from £5,000 to £10,500. This means 865,000 employers won't pay any national insurance at all next year. And over 1 million will pay the same or less than they did previously. This will allow a small business to employ the equivalent of 4 full-time workers on the national living wage without paying any national insurance on their wages.
That's quite a neat way of
Madam
appeasing
Deputy Speaker,
businesses for
let me
these
now
increases,
come
isn't
to
it?
capital gains tax.
Absolutely, because it says
we need to drive growth, promote entrepreneurship and support wealth creation, maintaining a significant gap compared to the higher rate of capital gains tax. Together, the OBR say that these measures will raise £2.5 billion by the end of the forecast.
Yeah, but rising
in a
from
sign
10
of
to
this
18%
government's commitment to supporting growth and
14 months,
entrepreneurship,
15 months'
we have
time.
already... Finally, we will reform agricultural property relief and business property relief. From April 2026, the first £1 million of combined business and agricultural assets will continue to attract no inheritance tax at all. But for assets over £1 million, inheritance tax will apply with a 50% relief at an effective rate of 20%. This will ensure that we continue to protect small family farms. We intend to introduce 2 permanently lower tax rates for retail, hospitality and leisure properties, which make up the backbone of our high streets across the country. And it is our intention that it is paid for by a higher multiplier for the most valuable properties. So I will today provide 40% relief on business rates for the retail, hospitality and leisure industry in 2025-26. Alongside this, the small business tax multiplier will be frozen next year. But nearly 2/3 of alcoholic drinks sold in pubs are served on draft. So today, instead of uprating these products in line with inflation, I am cutting draft duty by 1.7%.
That's a neat way of getting around the supermarket under pricing pubs as well.
Which means a penny off the pints in the pub. Alongside the changes I am making today,
More than a penny off in
I am
West Oxfordshire.
publishing a corporate tax roadmap. We will abolish the non-dom tax regime. And we will remove the outdated concept of domicile from the tax system from April 2025.
It doesn't do long to fix it,
We
does
will
it?
introduce a new residence-based scheme with internationally competitive rates. In our manifesto, we committed to reforming stamp duty land tax to raise revenues while supporting those buying their first home. We are increasing the stamp duty land tax surcharge for second homes, known as the higher rate for additional dwellings, by 2 percentage points to 5%, which will come into effect from tomorrow.
Ooh.
We will introduce VAT on private school fees from January 2025. And we will shortly introduce legislation to remove their business rates relief from April 2025 too. From 2028-29, personal tax thresholds will be uprated in line with inflation once again.
That's the rabbit.
When it comes to choices, and finally, this government is committed to reforming special educational needs provision to improve outcomes for our most vulnerable children and to ensure that the system is financially sustainable. To support that work, I am today providing a £1 billion uplift in funding, a 6% real terms increase from this year. There is no more important job for government than to keep our country safe.
VAT.
And we are conducting a strategic defence review to be published next year.
Children, yeah.
And today I am providing over £5 billion of government investment to deliver our plans on housing next year, to boost the supply of homes and support our small house builders, and trains between Oxford and Bedford running from 2030. We are delivering
Oxford to Hamburg running at the moment, so good luck with that.
And I commend this statement to the House.
There we go. Ooh. So, Toby, we've just seen the very first budget from Labour government for 14 years. And it was striking. There was quite a lot in there, but I think overall, my overriding impression was that, bearing in mind how much we've heard in the media about the amount of bad news to expect from this, it wasn't as bad as I thought. What were your
agree.
thoughts?
I went into this thinking that I'm going to have lots of clients and small businesses crying, scrabbling around, trying to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to solve all of these problems. We've just been given a beating. And it appeared that every time there was one of those bad news announcements, there was also a little, a gift back to help the small businesses. And I don't think it was as bad as I was expecting by any stretch.
I think, the headline is that she's got to find £40 billion, which is a heck of a lot of money. And we were led to believe, or we were led to expect a raft of measures, not all of which have come in. So I guess it's one of those situations whereby, you sort of peddle lots of doom and gloom, but actually in reality, it's not as bad as you think. And I think that's really good news for the economy and for us locally, because people have almost been, I think, sitting on tenterhooks now for the last couple of weeks, waiting for this big fiscal event, expecting the worst. And the worst hasn't really come to fruition.
No, and one of the drivers that I thought seemed to be going through the budget is that some of that 40 billion was going to be done through efficiency savings and modernisation of how government and government department works and how the NHS works. My only fear on that is that whilst the numbers would work, so the Office of Budget Responsibility will agree with those numbers and then build those in, we all know how government departments work, and they're very clunky, and getting those changes through and how you do those efficiency savings, it's
not going to be a quick fix. It's not going to be a quick fix. The devil is always in the detail, and we've literally just finished watching this. But I think for me, it seems as though that bank of money is being found through a number of measures. Obviously, through things that were much trialled in advance. The increase on business costs of national insurance. We expected that. We knew that was coming. VAT on public schools. We expected that. We knew it was coming, and it doesn't raise that much anyway. But there are some good news things in there. And yes, efficiency savings is another way they've done it. And I think, when we start to get into detail, there was quite a long piece that ultimately I think was around changing the rules. She's brought in a new metric that they've already met 2 years in advance. Well, you just invented the metric. But, that aside, I think it wasn't all bad news. And what I took away was, I'm thinking back to the last budget where housing wasn't even mentioned once. And housing is something that affects us nationally, but also, particularly here in West Oxfordshire, where the cost of housing is much higher than the average wage locally. So it's hugely unaffordable. And there was a whole segment on housing, which I think does reflect how seriously this administration is treating the housing bit. My key takeaway from that, my chief concern was, there's a lot of change in legislation at the moment around landlords and that is driving landlords out of the sector. As of tomorrow, the sort of unexpected increase in stamp duty land tax from 2% to 5%, the levy for additional properties, means not only are we losing landlords, but we are discouraging actively discouraging landlords from entering the sector. Yeah. And I think that's only going to exacerbate the shortage of private rental sector stock, and also increase the rate of rents that are being charged, because it's just simple supply and demand.
And it might be that's why she alluded and had that housing part in there, because they're almost going to try and nationalise the rental market by having affordable housing.
Well, yes, I mean, there was lots around, but of course, this is coming in as of tomorrow, and if we look at how long it takes to deliver new housing, then there's going to be a gap between those two, where I think the pain is going to be most acutely felt. But I was really reassured to see that they're focusing on small builders, because we used to be a nation of small builders, and it's become sort of swamped by some big players now, the big sort of 5 or 6 building companies. But actually, if we are going to see growth in hitting construction targets, then it's going to be by the small and medium builders sort of getting back out there and putting bricks and mortar in the ground. So that was, I think, realistic and reassuring to see.
Yeah, and it did seem to very much focus on grassroots and trying to get that bedrock of grassroots, whilst also trying to get the investment from into the country from the big players.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was good to see. And I think in terms of social rents, the fact that the escalator is going to go up by CPI plus 1% is good news. That's been frozen for the last year and was below, or well below, what rents are being asked for at the moment. And so those people in receipt of universal credit are not getting the support they need to be able to rent a property in the private rental sector at the moment, and it creates, that divide has just been widening. So that was good to see as well.
I think for me, the only bad news that I was expecting and I thought might come along the road is the withdrawal of the exemption for the agricultural exemptions on inheritance tax. And whilst they didn't completely withdraw it, and they've still got that £1 million allowance, I think that could have a major impact on the farming community. And obviously we live in a very rural area, lots absolutely. Of small farms. And with property prices, how big does your farm need to be to get to £1 million?
Yeah, not huge. And it was interesting, I thought, how that was presented in the budget, in that it wasn't, it was a case of, we're discounting it by 50%, i.e. we're only going to tax it at 20%. But of course, that's going up to 20% from zero. And so that is a very significant change. And although it's dressed up as a 50% discount on the normal, 40% rate, it is a very significant change, going from 0 to 20%, which is going to have significant implications. What other things really struck you about the budget? Was there anything else in there that really jumped out at you?
Like I said, I think one of the things I did think is they're looking at the business rates and how they're going to reduce those sort of retail and hospitality sectors, which is desperately needed, especially in the independent sector.
Yep.
And they said they were going to fund that by increasing taxes on wealthy properties. I still think they need to look at how do you transfer some of that business rates onto an online platform, because you have very, very large organisations and they're not paying a fraction of the business
very
rates
low tax rates. Yeah, you are continuing to place that burden on those people who provide something on our high streets. And in a rural community, people rely on our town centres for their daily needs, and actually the businesses that operate in that environment are finding it increasingly difficult to shoulder that burden when they're up against online only or predominantly online retailers, and that is a difficult problem that I don't think has even started to be tackled.
No, and like I said, I think everyone knew that the increase in employers' national insurance, the evasion of answering the questions told everyone that was going to come along. But again, they've increased the allowance, for small businesses from 5 to 10.5. And I think, as Rachel Reeves said, you can employ 4 staff at the national living wage, and that's still break even. So I think that's a good thing for the small employers.
Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of what I call fools and horses moments. No income tax, no VAT, no money back, no guarantee. But she did sort of say half of that on 2 occasions. But I thought it was interesting that the sort of the stealth tax fiscal drag, they're not going to hold those bands, but those income tax bands are now going to increase with inflation. I thought was a really good thing. It means that people can now earn more next year and not be dragged into those higher tax bands, depending on where they sit. I thought that was really good. And it's those sorts of things around affordability that will support the housing market. Of course, we've had the budget now. People will be digesting that as we speak, and on the back of this. And, there'll be a Bank of England rate decision due very shortly. The American election, US election, is coming up around the corner. So I think that the bounce from this for the wider economy, for the housing market, for business in general, is going to be positive, because it's not as bad as we thought.
Yes, I was going to ask you actually, because obviously the capital gains rates, that could have had a major impact on your sector.
Yeah,
but I think the property is remaining the same.
Yeah, I think no major changes. So the stamp duty changes that were already baked in and announced haven't been overturned. So first time buyers will start to pay a bit more stamp duty from April of next year. That hasn't changed at all. But you know what? We knew that was going to be the case unless it was overturned. It wasn't overturned. So no real change there. And I think by far the biggest drivers for the housing market will be the next Bank of England rate decision, which is widely expected to be downwards. Here's hoping, but no, I think it should be, and that will see a resilient and busy housing market. And of course, here in West Oxfordshire, we are building very few new homes at the moment. And we are seeing net migration into the area. Again, I mentioned it before, supply and demand. We have seen and will continue to see, I believe, house prices increasing here in West Oxfordshire, because we face a very sort of regional economy.
Yeah. So I think overall, better than we expected. And I think there's opportunities for that budget to really give some decent growth to the economy, especially locally. And if it works, it's a good budget.
Absolutely. And I think for the small businesses and the medium businesses that you advise from an accountancy perspective, there's going to be a lot in the detail, a lot around, how much does that mean for me paying in terms of business rates and increases in national insurance. Some quite a few exemptions and things that were brought in for businesses employing 4 or fewer people. So those really small businesses are going to be exempted from those increases. But quite a lot of work for you to do to work out what this means for your clients going forwards, I suspect.
I think so. I mean, one of the things I was slightly grateful for is because we play in the small business marketplace, I won't have a huge amount of people coming to me with the removal of the non-dom status. So that'll be for the bigger practices to deal with that one.
Yeah, that's a London market thing. Yeah, absolutely. We're not worried about that in the Shire.
But as you say, it's always the devil is in the detail of when that comes out. But headlines look fine. And now I can start when clients are asking me a question. 2 days ago, I was, the answer was, well, wait and see. Whereas now
we know. So no, really useful. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with that. Let's head to the pub and enjoy our 1p off on the pint. Thank you.